King Reedlock, Alpha of the Sunstone Pack and Sovereign of the Northern Territories, was having an excellent day. His wolf agreed, though it would never say so with anything as undignified as enthusiasm. The Stonefang incursion is resolved, no casualties, optimal outcome. The hall is secure, the perimeter is held, and our mate is 17 paces to our left, which is 3 paces further than preferred. Reed raised his goblet and let himself feel it, the warmth of firelight on stone walls, the roar of his pack celebrating in the great hall of Stonefall Citadel. The rival Stonefang pack, after a decade of border disputes that had consumed half his waking hours and most of Marcus's patience, had finally bent the knee. No blood shed in the final confrontation. A strategic victory of positioning and sheer, calculated intimidation. His wolf tracked the room with habitual precision. South entrance, 2 of ours. North corridor, clear.
The elder with the bad hip is favoring it worse tonight. Note for later. The mate has flour on her left cheek. She always misses the left side. A pause. We should fix that for her. Reed found her across the hall, Wren, his mate. The bond had arrived 5 weeks ago, a collision of scent and recognition that had buckled his knees in the middle of the Citadel kitchens. He'd gone down there to discuss provisioning for the campaign, and instead he'd walked into the gravitational pull of warm bread and something underneath it, something green and sharp, like rosemary cut in the rain, and the world had rearranged itself around a woman with flour on her cheek and a knife in her hand. She hadn't buckled. She had looked at him, the Alpha King, 6'5" and suddenly incapable of speech, and raised one eyebrow as though he were a delivery that had arrived at the wrong door. "To my mate, Wren," he boomed, and the hall quieted to a murmur. Every head turned. Wren, seated at the high table, inclined her head. She was lovely in a way that bypassed prettiness entirely. Calm brown eyes that catalogued everything, steady hands, a composure more commanding than any shout. She wore a deep blue dress, simple, and on it looked more regal than the ermine-trimmed robes of the visiting dignitaries. "My love," he continued, his voice dropping but still carrying to the walls. "Today my pack is secure. My enemies are humbled. My heart is full. It is all meaningless without you to share it. Ask of me anything, and it is yours." A collective sigh rippled through the crowd. Poets reaching for quills, bards already embellishing. 17 paces away, Wren Vale's heart was hammering. Her wolf, the part of her that had never once in her life had the patience for diplomacy, spoke with its usual cutting clarity. "He means it. He actually means it. The man just offered you the world, in front of 500 witnesses, and he has no idea what you're about to do with it." Wren took a sip of wine. Her hand was steady. It was always steady when it needed to be, which was most of the time, which was exhausting if she thought about it too long. She loved him. That was the part that made this hard, not the asking, but the knowing that he wouldn't understand why she was asking, and that it would hurt him before it helped him. 3 years she'd worked in these kitchens. 3 years of hearing soldiers' complaints echo down the corridors, of watching petitions pile up unanswered on administrative desks, of knowing, with the bone-deep certainty of someone who listened because nobody thought to lower their voice around the baker, that the southern aqueducts were failing, that Lord Ashford was stealing water from old Alistair's farm, that the military was drilling itself into exhaustion, preparing for a war already won. She knew these things because she paid attention, and because people talked freely around someone they didn't really see. Her wolf had been the one to find the law. 3 weeks ago, restless after a shift that hadn't settled her, pacing the Citadel library at midnight while the lore master's shelves gathered dust. There, Article 7, Subclause Gamma. Read it again. Read it carefully. This is ours. The Mirror Week. A provision that allowed a bonded mate to temporarily assume full authority. Unused in 200 years. Legally sound. Wren had read it 7 times, checked it against 3 different codices, and then lain awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling. "You've been staring at the ceiling for 3 weeks, her wolf observed. "You know what needs doing. You know you can do it." The only question is whether you're going to keep waiting for someone to hand you permission, or whether you're going to take the chair. Wren set her goblet down. She loved Reed. She loved the way he carried the weight of this pack on his shoulders like it was the only thing holding him together. She loved his seriousness and the rare, startling warmth underneath it. She was not doing this to diminish him. She was doing this because she'd seen the cracks in the foundation of his kingdom, and she knew how to fix them. And this was the only door that would open. "Anything?" she asked, her voice quiet but clear. "Anything," he confirmed, golden eyes warm with affection. "The throne." The hall went silent, not the respectful quiet of earlier, a stunned, breathless void. Someone choked on their mead. Reed's smile froze, then slowly, carefully, disassembled itself. His wolf processed the input. She has requested sovereign authority, in public, before the full pack and allied witnesses. A beat. Her heart rate is elevated but controlled. She is not joking. "Reassess." "I'm sorry," Reed said. "What was that?" Wren's gaze held his. She wasn't flinching. She wasn't smiling. She was looking at him the way she looked at bread dough that needed a firm hand, with absolute focus and no sentimentality. "I want the throne," she repeated. "You said anything." He laughed, and it came out wrong, too loud, too hollow. "My love, you jest. The throne is not a gift, it is a burden." She didn't laugh. "I'm not jesting, Reed. I want to rule. You get a week off." His beta, Marcus, a man whose default expression suggested he had been tired since birth and whose primary function was absorbing the consequences of Reed's decisions, slowly lowered his face into his hands. Reed's wolf was running calculations at speed. She is serious. She has prepared for this. Her scent carries no uncertainty. She planned this before tonight, before the feast. She has been carrying this intention. We did not detect it. This last observation arrived with a note of something very close to professional respect. "Wren," Reed began, keeping his voice indulgent, careful. "This is very... I invoke the mirror week." The words fell like stones into still water. Gasps cascaded through the crowd. The pack elders straightened. Marcus's head came up, eyes wide. The voice belonged to Marin, the pack's chief lore master, a sharp-eyed woman with silver-streaked hair and spectacles she didn't need but wore out of habit. She was already reciting from memory. Pack Law, Article 7, Subclause Gamma, the Lex Speculi. A one-time, non-repeatable, 7-day transfer of full executive authority between bonded mates, provided the bond is formally recognized and uncoerced, witnessed by the council. The seeding alpha takes a vow of non-interference. She looked up, and her eyes were bright with the joy of someone whose most obscure area of expertise had just become suddenly, spectacularly relevant. "The law is sound." Elder Harlan raised a hand. "With respect, Lore Master, this law has not been tested in 2 centuries. I would see the text before we proceed." Marin produced a thin, cracked volume from somewhere inside her robes with the speed of someone who had been waiting her entire career for this moment. "Article 7, Subclause Gamma, page 412. You'll find it marked." She held it out. "Anyone else?" No one moved. The text was passed to Harlan, who read it, his jaw tightening with each line. He set it down without comment. Reed stared at Wren, searched for any crack in her composure, any hint that this was theater. Found nothing but quiet, steel-cable resolve. He had said anything. In front of his entire pack, his allied alphas, his humbled rivals. To refuse now was to declare his own word worthless. He looked at the Sunstone throne, carved from the heart of the mountain, warm only for the Locke bloodline. Then he looked at his mate, the woman who smelled of rosemary and bread and home. The woman who had just staged the most polite, completely legal coup in the history of their people. His wolf, after a long silence. "She outmaneuvered us. using our own declaration as the entry point, at a public event we controlled. Another pause, and when the thought came, it carried something Reed could only describe as quiet awe. She is formidable. Very well, he said. The words cost him. He forced his shoulders back, projecting calm he did not feel. The Mirror Week is invoked. The council will convene at dawn to witness the transfer. A roar went through the hall. Shock, excitement, sheer delight at the drama. Wren simply nodded, as if he'd agreed to pass the salt. She picked up her goblet, took a sip, and met his eyes over the rim. He expected triumph. What he saw was something more complex, purpose, and underneath it, something soft and worried that looked very much like love. He sat down heavily. The grandeur of his victory feast was turning to ash around him. Beside him, Marcus exhaled, a long, mournful sound perfected over years of proximity to Reed's worst decisions. You just had to say anything, didn't you? The beta muttered. You couldn't have offered her a pony. Reed didn't answer. He was watching Wren, who was now calmly discussing dessert options with a servant, her posture as relaxed as if she'd asked him to pass the breadbasket, instead of hand over sovereign power. Through the bond, he could feel her. Not calm, not exactly. Determined. And underneath the determination, something tender and worried that she was working very hard to keep out of her expression. He didn't know what to do with that. The transfer ceremony took place at sunrise. Reed had always found the practice bracing. Standing there shivering in the pre-dawn chill, he was beginning to see Wren's point about nobody making good decisions at this hour. The Council of Elders looked on with expressions ranging from Elder Harlan's stony disapproval to Marin's barely concealed academic glee. Wren stood before the sunstone throne in a practical woolen dress. She looked less like a queen assuming power and more like a woman about to thoroughly reorganize a cluttered room. Reed recited the vow of non-interference, each word a small, precise wound to his pride, and placed the Alpha's sigil ring into her hand. Her fingers were cool and steady. The authority is yours, he said. For 7 days, his wolf noted. Her hand did not tremble. Her scent is focused. She has prepared for this moment. We have not. Then, quieter, she is still wearing the scent of our bedsheets. She did not sleep elsewhere last night. This is noted. Wren slid the ring onto her thumb, too large, but she didn't seem to mind, and sat on the sunstone throne without ceremony. The ancient seat, which legend said grew warm only for a true Lock Alpha, did nothing. Wren shifted slightly, testing the stone. Comfortable enough, she said to the room. The first council session will convene this morning, she announced, and her voice carried a quiet authority that owed nothing to magic thrones. At 10 o'clock. Elder Harlan, a craggy-faced traditionalist who had served Reed's father and never quite forgiven Reed for not being him, scoffed. Your Majesty, he said, the title careful and condescending. The council has met at dawn for 500 years. It is tradition. Wren looked at him. It was the look she gave a pot about to boil over, measured, calm, and already 2 steps ahead. And for 500 years, have your first decisions of the day been your best ones? Or have they been the ones you've revised by lunch? She gestured around the room. You are powerful, respected leaders. You are also not young men. You need sleep, a proper breakfast. Nobody thinks clearly at sunrise, and the state of our southern aqueduct maintenance schedule proves it. She let that land. 10 o'clock. Be rested, be fed. Bring solutions, not just problems. Harlan opened his mouth, then shut it. He had, in fact, been complaining about the aqueduct schedule for months. Reed was escorted to the Murmuring Gallery, a public viewing area high in the throne room walls, enchanted to carry every whisper from the floor. It was where petitioners waited, where junior pack members observed, the political equivalent of the children's table. 2 guards escorted him, unsure whether to bow or offer him a blanket. He sat on the cold stone bench, looked down at his throne room, which was his but also wasn't. His wolf settled into a watchful stillness. We are in an observation position, suboptimal for command, adequate for assessment. The mate is conferring with Marcus. She has a map. His posture has changed. He is engaged. He has not looked engaged in some time. At 10 o'clock, the council reconvened. The elders filed in looking suspiciously alert. Someone had put pastries and coffee on a side table, and several elders fell upon them with barely concealed gratitude. Wren started the meeting not with grievances, but with a question. Elder Harlan, the aqueducts. Explain it to me as if I know nothing about them. Reed listened for 2 hours, his fury slowly morphing into something stranger. He had always run council meetings like a general, present the issue, lay out his strategy, solicit feedback. Decisive, efficient. Exactly how his father had done it. Wren ran it like a study group. She didn't propose solutions. She asked questions. She let Gerald, the pack's chief engineer, argue with Harlan for 10 minutes, occasionally interjecting to clarify. So, Gerald, the western quarry stone is cheaper but needs resurfacing in 50 years. Harlan, you're saying river granite costs more now but lasts 200 years. Is that the core of it? They both blinked, nodded. The argument, stripped of bluster and personal animosity, was just a cost-benefit analysis. What do our stonemasons think? Wren asked. Has anyone asked them? Stunned silence. They hadn't. A runner was dispatched. A gruff stonemason, stone dust still in his eyebrows, was brought before the council. He explained that river granite was a nightmare to work with and would delay the project past winter freeze. But there was a third option, a reinforced concrete Gerald's apprentices had been developing, stronger than quarry stone, cheaper than granite, faster to implement. By noon, a problem snarled in red tape for a year had a solution that everyone supported. From his gallery perch, Reed felt something shift inside him. Not just respect, something more unsettling. He'd seen the aqueduct issue as a political conflict between two powerful elders, a thing to manage. Wren had seen it as a leaky pipe and talked to the plumber. His wolf was quiet for a long time, then. Our father managed these same elders for 20 years. He never asked the stonemason either. Neither did we. Reed didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. Day 2. Wren reinstated open court, a tradition Reed's father had abolished 3 decades ago, calling it an inefficient waste of time. All petitions had since been submitted through layers of bureaucracy, most of them vanishing into the machinery. Wren had the throne room doors thrown open. Anyone with a grievance may have it heard. A line formed immediately. Farmers, merchants, artisans, herders. Reed braced for a day of bickering. The first petitioner was a weathered old farmer named Alistair. The Whisper Creek dispute. Legendary. Lord Ashford, a minor noble with friends on the council, had been illegally damming the creek for a decade, diverting water from Alistair's farm. Petitions filed, lawyers hired, mountains of conflicting documents. The case was a permanent fixture on the judiciary's backlog. Wren listened to both sides. Alistair, 5 minutes, voice cracking. Ashford, 10 minutes, blustering about ancestral rights, waving an impressive scroll. Then Wren said, Lord Ashford, this is a very impressive document. Is your wolf as proud of your lineage as you are? Ashford puffed up. The Ashford line is pure, Your Majesty. Then you won't mind shifting. You too, Master Alistair. Confusion rippled through the court. Ashford stammered. Whisper Creek is pack territory, Wren said, her voice mild and immovable. Our wolves know territory. They know what's old and what's new. They know the scent of a lie. Let's take the lawyers out of it. Shift. Run to the creek. Show me the dam. Alistair's face lit with fierce hope. He was already pulling off his shirt, his body contorting into the familiar, painful bright snap of the change. Within seconds, a rangy gray wolf stood where the farmer had been, shaking out his coat, ears pricked toward the door, ready. Lord Ashford went pale. His wolf couldn't lie about the scent of freshly cut timber on a supposedly ancient dam. To be exposed by your own nature, in open court? No amount of money could erase that.
Your Majesty, this is undignified.
What's undignified? Wren said, and her voice dropped its gentleness like a coat she no longer needed. Is a man of your station slowly starving a fellow pack member for 10 years over a bit of extra water? You have two choices. Shift and run with him now, or go dismantle that dam before sundown and pay Master Alistair 10 years' reparations. Choose. Ashford crumbled. I will see to the dam, Your Majesty. And the reparations. And the reparations. He practically fled. Alistair's wolf let out a single sharp bark, not triumph, just relief, and trotted after him, claws clicking on the stone floor. Wren turned to the court. Next. 20 minutes. A decade-long injustice. Solved. Reed was floored. He had seen Whisper Creek as a legal quagmire. Wren had seen it as a question of truth, and used the most fundamental tool of their people, the wolf itself, as her witness. The rest of the day blurred with similar judgments. A merchant dispute settled by having both parties demonstrate their craft. A territorial spat between herders resolved by consulting their sheepdogs. Absurd. Unconventional. It worked every time. By evening, a dozen festering problems had been cleared. The atmosphere in the citadel was electric, a crackling, bewildered energy that Reed could feel from the gallery like a change in weather. The gossip was intoxicating. She just listens, and, did you see Ashford's face? And, my cousin got his stolen tools back. She made the thief apologize and then apprentice with him for a month to learn the value of his craft. That night, he found her not in the royal chambers but in the kitchens, kneading dough. Sleeves rolled up, flour on her cheek, the left side, always the left side. The Alpha's sigil ring sitting in a small, clean bowl on the counter. She looked up as he entered. The kitchens were behind on the morning bread, she said simply. I thought I'd help. He stood in the doorway, the Alpha King, feeling like an intruder in his own castle. What you did today, the farmer, the court, it was practical, she said, punching the dough down with a force that suggested the dough had personally wronged her. People want to be heard, Reed. They want to know that their truth matters more than a rich man's scroll. He wanted to argue, to defend the legal system his father had built, the layers of process and procedure. He couldn't. The results were unassailable. Through the bond he felt her, tired, satisfied, and underneath both, a thread of something he'd been feeling from her all day. Not triumph, something closer to vindication. The quiet, fierce relief of a woman who had known she could do this and had finally been given the chance to prove it. His wolf said nothing for a long time. Then, she sees what we have not been seeing. The question is whether we failed to look or whether we were taught not to. That night, Reed shifted. He hadn't planned it. He'd been pacing his chambers, unable to sleep, his skin too tight and his thoughts too loud. The shift took him between one step and the next, a surrender more than a decision. His wolf form was large, dark-furred, built for endurance rather than speed. He slipped out through the lower gate and ran the northern ridge under a half moon, alone, the cold air stripping away everything but sensation. His wolf ran in silence. No strategic assessment, no cataloging of threats. Just the rhythmic strike of paws on frozen ground, the sharp green smell of pine. The world reduced to what was immediate and true. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs shook, and then he ran further, because the thing he was running from was inside him and had no scent he could track. When he shifted back, crouched and breathless in the snow, he felt scraped clean. Not better, just honest. His father had abolished open court. His father had driven the military to exhaustion. His father had let Alistair's Creek dispute rot for years. His father had been a legend. And Wren was quietly, methodically, proving that the legend had cracks. He pulled on the clothes he'd stashed at the gate and walked back inside, and the thought that followed him was this. What if the man I've spent 20 years trying to become was wrong about the things that mattered most? Day 3. The Generals. Reed's top military commanders arrived at the newly mandated hour of 11, expecting to brief the temporary queen and return to their drills. General Callum, a massive wolf with a scar bisecting his eyebrow, detailed their northern border formations, the same briefing Reed had heard a dozen times. When he finished, Wren tapped a finger on the map. General, when did you last have dinner with your family on a weeknight? Callum blinked. Ma'am? And Commander Rhea, your daughter's recital is next week. Are you attending? Rhea flushed. I hadn't considered it. We're on high alert. For what? Wren asked. The Stonefangs have submitted. The passes are snowed in. No hostile movement in 100 leagues. You've been drilling the same formations for 6 months. Your soldiers are exhausted, General. Their families miss them. She stood. Go home. Take the week. Give your soldiers leave. Let them remember what they're protecting. From the gallery, Reed felt panic. Granting mass leave? His father would have. But Callum and the commanders weren't arguing. They were looking at Wren with an expression Reed recognized from his own reflection on the night he'd first held Wren's hand. Profound, startled relief. Go on, she said. Your families are part of this pack's strength. They filed out with the quiet gratitude of people given an unexpected gift. By afternoon, news had spread through the barracks. Later, Reed saw Commander Rhea walking in the gardens with her young daughter, the girl chattering about her upcoming performance. The child shifted mid-sentence, small legs becoming small paws, and tumbled into the grass, yipping. Rhea laughed and shifted after her, 2 wolves rolling in the late autumn sunlight, and the sound of it, the easy, uncomplicated joy, hit Reed somewhere behind his ribs. His wolf observed. The commander's daughter shifted without hesitation. She is comfortable in her skin. This is what pack life is supposed to look like when it is not being squeezed for efficiency. A beat. We had forgotten what ease looks like. That is a significant oversight. The morale of the army, which Reed had forged in the fires of discipline and relentless preparation, had just been raised to unprecedented heights by a single act of common-sense compassion. He felt it through the pack bond, a lightness in the citadel he hadn't felt in years, like a held breath being released. That evening, Reed found Wren reviewing trade ledgers in the library. About the military, he said, granting mass leave can dull readiness. She didn't look up. Is it a machine, Reed? Or is it a garden? A machine you run until it breaks. A garden needs rest, or the soil depletes. She met his eyes. Your army is the best in the world, but you were running them ragged, preparing for a war you've already won. He wanted to argue. He had seen Rhea with her daughter. He couldn't. I ran a home, she said, quieter. I know the difference between productive work and busy work. A home is a small kingdom. A kingdom is just a very large, very complicated home. Day 4. Wren spent the morning overhauling the petition system, replacing the bureaucratic layers that swallowed complaints with a direct register that any pack member could sign. She restructured the Treasury's quarterly reporting so the numbers actually made sense to the people who needed them, and she held a second open court session that cleared another 8 cases from the backlog. It was the quietest day of her week, and still more productive than most months under the old system. But the real work of Day 4 happened before dawn, when Wren shifted. Not publicly, not for the pack. Alone in the small walled garden behind the royal quarters. She needed to think, and her wolf thought more clearly than she did. Fewer layers of politeness in the way. In wolf form, Wren was compact and quick, tawny-furred with dark ears. She circled the garden twice, scenting the herbs she'd planted there during her first week as Reed's mate. Rosemary, thyme, winter savory. Then she lay down in the cold grass and let her mind go still. 3 days in, and the pack was responding. The aqueducts were moving. Ashford's dam was coming down. The barracks were peaceful. But tonight she had to prepare for Volkov, and the trade ledgers she'd been reading since her first night on the throne told a story that made her jaw tight. Volkov's quartermasters had been reselling Sunstone grain to the southern clans at profit for 2 years. The fishing rights violation in the Crystal River was documented in 3 separate reports that had been filed and ignored. Marcus had confirmed the details when she'd asked, his eyebrows climbing. "You're stalling," her wolf said. "You know what to do with Volkov. That's not what's keeping you up." No, what was keeping her up was Reed. She could feel him through the bond, a dull, complicated ache of pride and fear and something that tasted like grief. He was watching her succeed, and it was breaking something in him. And she hadn't figured out how to fix that yet. She hadn't figured out how to show him that this wasn't a competition, that she wasn't trying to prove his way was wrong. She was trying to show him there was more than one way. "He'll get there," her wolf said, with a certainty Wren didn't feel. "He's smarter than his fear. And if he's not, that's his problem, not ours." "He's my mate," Wren thought. "His problems are my problems." "Fine, but you don't fix it by being smaller. You fix it by being exactly what you are and trusting him to be big enough to love it." She shifted back, pulled her dress on over goose-bumped skin, and stood in the garden for a moment, watching the sky lighten over the citadel's eastern wall. She missed him. She missed the weight of his arm across her waist in the dark, the low rumble of his voice when he was half asleep, the ridiculous formality with which he asked permission to kiss her every single time, as though she might one day change her mind. She missed the man, not the king. The king was the problem. "Stop being maudlin," her wolf said. "You have a Frostfang to gut." Diplomatically. Wren almost smiled. She went to prepare for Volkov. Day 5. Alpha Volkov of the Frostfang pack arrived for trade negotiations. A hard, cold wolf from a hard, cold land. He saw diplomacy as war and weakness as something to devour. He strode into the throne room flanked by guards who looked carved from ice. Tall, pale-eyed, merciless. He gave Wren a glance and dismissed her. "I am here to see King Reed. I do not negotiate with placeholders." Marcus growled. Wren stopped him with a hand. "King Reed is unavailable," she said, pleasant as a locked door. "You'll negotiate with me." Volkov laughed. "I think not." "You can wait," Wren agreed, "but I'd advise against it." She leaned forward and the pleasant mask came off. "Alpha Volkov, I have your trade proposal. You're asking for 20% more grain, citing a poor harvest, while offering to pay 10% less. Your quartermasters have been reselling our grain to the southern clans at profit for 2 years. We have the receipts." She slid a parchment across the table. "You also violated our Crystal River fishing rights last month, taking triple the agreed limit. My mate was displeased." Reed, in the gallery, went cold. He had been planning to revoke Volkov's trade route and seize his territorial assets. He'd been working himself into a righteous fury over it for weeks. How did she? "I argued for diplomacy," Wren continued, her voice dropping to a murmur that still carried. "I suggested renegotiation rather than retaliation. My mate would have chosen differently. He is less patient than I am." She folded her hands. "So you can wait for him. I'm sure he'd be delighted to reopen this discussion next week. Or you and I sign a fair agreement today, market price for grain, repayment for the fish. Your choice." Volkov's eyes found Reed in the gallery, searching for a tell, a crack, a signal that this was bluff. Reed met his gaze and gave him nothing. In that moment, his loyalty wasn't to his pride or to the silent fraternity of alphas. It was to her, the magnificent, terrifying woman on his throne. His wolf said very quietly. She is using our reputation as a weapon. She is wielding it with more precision than we ever have. This is extraordinary. Volkov looked back at Ren, found no weakness, no hesitation. I believe, he said through his teeth, that we can come to an agreement, Your Majesty. The negotiations took an hour. Ren conceded nothing important and recovered everything they were owed. When Volkov left, the throne room erupted. Council members on their feet, Marcus grinning. Reed didn't join in. He watched her, and the feeling inside him had shifted again. Past admiration, past the grudging respect of the first days, into something darker and more complicated. The particular nauseating vertigo of watching the foundation of your identity get calmly, competently, lovingly dismantled by someone who wasn't even trying to demolish it. It wasn't just that she was good. It was that her way of being good required his father's way to be wrong. The open court his father abolished, wrong. The military culture his father built, wrong. The bureaucracy that buried Alistair's petition, wrong. And Reed had spent 20 years modeling himself on those choices, defending them, perfecting them, telling himself that the weight on his shoulders was the proof he was doing it right. Every success of Ren's week was an indictment he couldn't look away from. Not because she was attacking his legacy, she wasn't. She had never once mentioned his father by name, but because the results spoke for themselves, and they were devastating. His wolf, for the first time, did not offer assessment. It simply sat with the weight of what they were both beginning to understand. That evening, Reed tried to assert himself. He found Ren in the library again, the trade ledgers now annotated in her neat, precise hand. The Volkov negotiation, he said. It was well handled. But in the future, using my reputation as a threat without consulting me. Would you have handled it differently? She asked, looking up. He opened his mouth, closed it. He would have revoked the trade route and seized Volkov's assets. The entire pack knew it. Ren's approach had achieved more and cost less. No, he said. She held his gaze, and for a moment her expression softened into something that wasn't the queen, wasn't the strategist, just Ren, looking at the man she loved with an ache she was trying not to show. I would never use your name as a weapon you didn't want me to wield, she said quietly. I used it because it was the truth. You would have been fierce. I just got there first. It was a kindness. She was being kind to him, and somehow that made it worse. The confrontation happened on the evening of the 6th day. It had been building like a pressure system, invisible until it broke. Reed had spent the afternoon in the gallery, watching Ren handle a dispute between two merchant guilds with the same calm, incisive efficiency she'd applied to everything else. She'd found the real issue in 10 minutes. She'd resolved it fairly. She'd made it look easy. And with every success, the thought he'd been circling for days drew tighter. She is not supplementing my rule. She is correcting it. Every reform she introduced was something his father had dismantled or never built. She wasn't just showing the pack a different way to lead. She was showing them that the way they'd been led, the way he had led, had been causing harm they'd all agreed to ignore. He left the gallery before the session ended, couldn't watch anymore. Elder Harlan had found him in the corridor. The old wolf's eyes were bright with something poisonous. The pack whispers, Alpha, Harlan said. They say she rules with a wisdom your father lacked, and a strength you have yet to show. They wonder if the Mirror Week should be extended. It was a lie, a provocation born of Harlan's own humiliation. He'd been publicly outmaneuvered by a baker's daughter on her first morning. But it landed on the fertile ground of Reed's fear like a match on dry kindling. He strode into the throne room. Ren was reviewing star charts with the pack's astrologer, alone. The week was almost over. The Citadel was buzzing with her name, Queen Ren, not temporary, just Queen. This has gone on long enough, he said. His voice was cold and formal and wrong, and he knew it was wrong even as he heard himself speaking. She looked up, dismissed the astrologer gently. "Reed, what's wrong?" "I am resuming my duties. The mirror week is over." Wren went still. "There's another day." It was an experiment. He couldn't stop. The words came from somewhere wounded and vicious, somewhere that was grieving a version of himself he wasn't ready to let go of. "You've had your fun, you've made your point, but the real work of ruling requires more than rearranging the furniture." The words hung in the air, ugly and final. He watched them land. He watched her face change, not crumbling, not breaking, but something worse. A light going out. The quiet confidence, the warmth, the openness, all of it retreating behind a wall he recognized because he'd seen it on the first day they'd met. The composure of a woman who had spent her life being competent in rooms that didn't notice. He had just put her back there. Inside Wren, something very quiet and very old pulled shut. A door she'd kept open for him. The door she'd opened when she'd first looked at this serious, beautiful man and thought, "I could trust you with this." Closed. Not slammed, just closed, with the careful precision of someone who had practiced protecting themselves. Her wolf said one word: "Walk." But Wren loved him. That was what made it unbearable. Not the dismissal, but the love that survived it. She loved him, and he had just looked at her and seen a game. 3 years of watching, 3 weeks of planning, 6 days of pouring everything she had into this pack. A game. "Walk," her wolf said again. "Don't argue, don't explain, don't beg." He broke the vow. He chose this. Walk out with your spine straight and let him sit in what he's done. Wren's face became smooth as glass. "I see," she said. No emotion. None at all. "You are the king. You may do as you wish." She stood, walked to the throne, picked up the sigil ring from where she'd placed it and held it out to him. Her hand trembled, barely. She hated the tremble. Her wolf hated it more. His wolf broke its silence with something that wasn't words. A sound inside him like a howl swallowed whole. "Wrong. This is wrong. We have done something unforgivable. Her scent has changed. She is in pain. Fix this now." And then, with devastating clarity, she was not trying to replace us. She was trying to stand beside us. And we destroyed it. But Reed was frozen, locked inside the armor of his own kingship. He took the ring, their fingers brushed, and the bond between them, which had been warm and steady and alive, felt frayed and cold. She turned and walked away, back straight, head high. She did not run, she did not cry. She walked the way she had walked every day of her life before the bond, contained, self-sufficient, needing nothing from anyone. The composure was perfect. Only someone who knew her would have noticed the way her fingers curled into fists at her sides, the nails pressing crescents into her palms. "Good," her wolf said as they crossed the threshold. "Don't look back. You gave him everything you had, and he called it a game. Don't you dare look back." She didn't. She walked through the corridors of the citadel she'd been running for 6 days, past the guards who straightened when they saw her, past the kitchens that still smelled like the bread she'd kneaded that morning, and she did not look back. Reed stood alone in the center of his throne room. The sound of her footsteps fading was the loneliest thing he had ever heard. He sat on the throne. It was cold. The stone, which legend said warmed for the Locke bloodline, felt like nothing at all under his hands. Something shifted in the pack bond, a faint, sickening lurch, like a string going slack. The oath. He had sworn it in front of the council, witnessed and sealed, and he had broken it. He could feel the cost settling into him, a dimming at the edges of the bond, a distance between himself and his pack that hadn't been there before. Not severance, diminishment, like a frequency dropping just enough to lose clarity. His wolf, already silent, seemed to recede further. Marin stepped forward from the edge of the room, her voice careful and precise. For the record, Alpha, the Lex Speculi vow of non-interference was binding. You have broken a witnessed oath. Under precedent, your word carries formal diminishment in any future oath-dependent proceeding until remedied by council vote. The bond cost you are feeling will persist until the council grants remediation. She paused. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, but the law is the law. He barely heard her. He was king again. He had never felt less powerful in his life. Empty space beside him, rosemary scent lingering. Morning. Gray light through the windows. The bed was half empty and smelled like rosemary. Her pillow, her side, her absence a physical thing he could have mapped with his eyes closed. The bond was a dull, silent ache, like pressing on a bruise to check if it still hurt. It did. He could feel her, distantly, alive, physically well, somewhere south and below, but the warmth was gone. The easy flow of feeling between them had narrowed to a trickle, and what came through was muted and guarded in a way that told him she'd pulled back deliberately. She was protecting herself from him. His wolf had gone quiet. Not the focused silence of threat assessment, not the companionable stillness of a run, the terrible, airless quiet of grief. Reed reached for it, reached for the steady voice that had been his compass for as long as he could remember, and found nothing. Just empty space where his other half had been. It was like reaching for a limb and finding it gone. The phantom sensation of a presence that should be there, that had always been there, now hollowed out. He walked through the castle like a ghost. Servants bowed, but their eyes were wary. The news had spread, it always did. The king had broken his vow. He had dismissed the queen. The jubilant energy of the past week had evaporated, replaced by a tense, uncertain quiet that smelled, to whatever was left of his wolf senses, like disappointment. He found Marcus in the armory, sharpening swords that didn't need sharpening. She's gone, Marcus said without looking up. Packed a bag before sunrise. Her family's home in the lower town. She left the Citadel? You dismissed her, Reed. Marcus finally looked at him, and the exhaustion in his eyes was layered with something worse, disappointment. You called her work a game. You treated her like a child you were tired of playing with. You also broke a sworn oath in front of witnesses. Do you understand what that costs you with the council? I was afraid, Reed said. Harlan said the pack wanted her to replace me. Harlan? You listened to that bitter old man over what you've seen with your own eyes for 6 days? Marcus's voice was sharp. Nobody wanted to replace you. They were in awe of her. We were proud that our king had chosen such a mate. We saw a partnership. You saw a competitor. He set the sword down. For a man who commands armies, you can be a spectacular idiot. What do I do? His voice was raw, stripped of every kingly register he'd spent his life perfecting. He sounded for the first time in Marcus's memory like a man asking for help. Marcus sighed. You don't send an edict. You don't send a gift. You don't send me. He pointed at Reed's chest. You go. Not the king, not the alpha. Just Reed, her mate. And you tell her the truth. Not about Harlan or the pack, but about you. The real, ugly, pathetic truth you're so terrified of. He stripped off the royal tunic. The sigil of the Alpha King, embroidered in gold thread, heavy with authority, fell to the floor and he left it there. He pulled on a plain leather jerkin, the kind any common packwolf might wear. His hands were shaking. The walk through the citadel was the longest of his life. Servants stepped aside, eyes averted. Guards at the gate didn't question him. Nobody stopped a man who looked like he was walking toward something that frightened him more than battle. The lower town was awake and bustling. Merchants calling to each other, children running between market stalls, the ordinary noise of a pack going about its day. Nobody recognized him out of his royal clothes. He was just another tall man with a grim expression and a long stride. and the anonymity was both a relief and a punishment. This was what it felt like to be no one, and Wren had carried this feeling for most of her life. The Vale Bakery was modest and sturdy, tucked into the town square. The air smelled of yeast and warm sugar. He knocked. Wren's father opened the door, a kind man with flour in the lines of his hands. His expression wasn't angry, just sad. He stepped aside. Reed found her in the back garden, tending herbs. She didn't look up. He stood there, and the silence was the hardest thing he'd ever held. "I'm not afraid of failing," he said, his voice stripped bare. "I'm afraid that everything I've been trying to be was wrong. My father was a legend, strong, ruthless, decisive. I built my entire identity on becoming him. And then you sat on his throne, and in 6 days you proved that his strength was sometimes cruelty. His decisiveness was sometimes blindness. And his legacy, the one I've spent 20 years perfecting, had cracks I refused to see." His voice broke. "When I watched you lead, I wasn't just afraid you were better than me. I was grieving. Because admitting you were right meant admitting he was wrong. And I wasn't ready to let go of who I thought I was supposed to be." Her hands stilled in the dirt. "What I said to you was the cruelest thing I've ever done. I took 6 days of mastery, real, brilliant, compassionate mastery, and I called it a game, because it was easier to diminish you than to grieve my own illusions." He took a breath that shook. "You have spent your life being the most capable person in every room you've entered, and being invisible in all of them. The last thing I ever wanted was to be one more person who didn't see you. And that's exactly what I became." She turned. Her eyes were wet. A single tear cut through the dirt on her cheek. "I wasn't trying to tear him down," she whispered. "Your father, your legacy. I wasn't trying to prove you wrong." "I know. I've spent 3 years in those kitchens hearing every problem this pack has. 3 years knowing I could help and having no way to do it." She wiped her cheek with the back of her wrist, leaving a smear of dirt. "I found the Mirror Week Law 3 weeks ago. My wolf found it, actually, midnight in the library, pacing like something was chasing me. I read it 7 times. I checked it against 3 codices. I made sure the bond formalization was airtight before I ever considered using it." She met his eyes, and what was in them wasn't shame. It was the hard-earned honesty of someone who was done hiding. "I planned this, Reed. I didn't stumble into it. Why do you think I pushed so hard for the bond formalization? I needed the legal standing before I could invoke the clause. I saw my one chance and I took it because I knew I could do it. And I didn't think enough about what it would cost you to watch me undo his work." A breath. "I should have talked to you first. I was so afraid you'd say no that I went around you instead, and I'm sorry for that." The admission hung between them, not an excuse, but the missing piece. She had been strategic. She had been ambitious. She had been right. And she had also been afraid. And the combination had led her to outmaneuver him instead of trusting him with the truth. "I love the man you are," she said. "Not the one you think you're supposed to be. The one who trips over shields and brings me jewelry with bad clasps and means every ridiculous word of every grand declaration. I just wanted to show you that the kingdom could hold both of us. I chose the wrong door to show you through." Something cracked open in his chest. Not breaking, releasing. A door that had been bolted from the inside for 20 years, swinging free. He could feel her through the bond again. Not the dull ache of separation, but the full, complicated warmth of her. The pain and the love and the stubborn, ferocious hope, and the guilt, too. Her guilt, sitting alongside his. Both of them holding something they needed to give back. He took a step closer. She didn't step back. "You shouldn't have had to find a loophole to be heard," he said. "If I'd been the kind of king who listened, the kind of mate who asked you what you saw, you wouldn't have needed the Mirror Week at all. That's on me." Her wolf, somewhere inside her, must have said something sharp and pointed. But what came through the bond was just Wren, exhausted, honest, reaching toward him with every part of herself that wasn't pride. "A home isn't run by one person," she said. "No," he agreed, his voice rough. "It's a partnership." She looked at him, truly looked, and he let her see all of it. The fear, the grief, the shame, the love that hadn't wavered even when he'd been too broken to show it. She didn't look away. For the first time in a day and a half, his wolf stirred. Not with assessment or strategy, just a single word delivered with a weight that felt like an oath. Mate. The final day of the Mirror Week. Wren returned to the Citadel with Reed. She didn't sit on the throne. She stood beside it. "The Mirror Week is concluded," she told the assembled council. "I return authority to my mate, Alpha King Reed Locke." She held out the sigil ring. Reed took her hand, closed her fingers around it. "Keep it," he said, loud enough for every ear in the room. "Wear it. A partnership has two leaders." He faced the council. "The reforms Queen Wren enacted this week are permanent. Council meetings at 10, open court monthly, military leave honored." His eyes found Harlan. The elder's seat was occupied, but not for long. "And Elder Harlan's council position is under review, pending investigation into conduct unbecoming during the Mirror Week." Harlan's face went gray. The other elders did not look sympathetic. Reed turned back to Wren, took her face in both hands, gently, the way he'd learned to touch her, like she was real and solid and not a dream he was afraid of waking from, and kissed her. Not for the council, not for politics, for them. A promise made in front of witnesses because he wanted it witnessed. He wanted every wolf in this hall to know that their king had found someone worth changing for, and that the change was not weakness. It was the first smart thing he'd done in 20 years. His wolf settled into something Reed had never felt from it before. Not vigilance, not assessment, but a deep, steady peace. The mate is beside us. The pack is whole. This is the correct configuration. Maintain it. Marin cleared her throat. "For the record, the oath breach remediation will require a formal council vote. I'll schedule it. But given the circumstances," she allowed herself the smallest smile, "I don't anticipate difficulty." They ran together that evening, both of them in wolf form, along the northern ridge under a sky turning copper and violet. Reed's wolf, dark and large and steady, and Wren's, tawny and quick and sure-footed. No words in wolf form, no strategy, no logistics, no politics. Just the two of them, moving through cold air and pine scent, reading the terrain with their bodies, reading each other through proximity and pace. At the top of the ridge, Wren stopped and sat, looking out over the valley where Stonefall Citadel glowed in the last light. Reed sat beside her, close enough that their fur touched, his dark coat against her tawny one, the warmth between them a simple animal fact. She leaned into him. He leaned back. Below them, the Citadel's windows were beginning to light, kitchens first, always the kitchens. And somewhere in the barracks, off-duty soldiers were laughing. And somewhere in the lower town, a baker was pulling bread from an oven that Wren's hands had tended for years. Wren made a small sound, not quite a bark, more like a soft exhalation, and stood, shaking out her coat. She bumped her shoulder against his, a deliberate, solid contact that said what words couldn't in wolf form. "I'm here. We're here. This is real." He bumped back, leaned his weight into hers for a moment, the way wolves did, not gently, but firmly, a physical declaration of presence. They stayed until the stars came out, two wolves on a hill, being still together, while the kingdom they shared went on living beneath them. 3 months later. Council meeting at 10, after a civilized breakfast. The atmosphere was collaborative, efficient, and startlingly creative. Gerald was presenting the aqueduct progress. Even Harlan's replacement, a younger wolf named Sable, sharp and pragmatic, was contributing thoughtfully. Wren sat not on the throne, but in a chair beside it, matched in height. The Alpha's sigil hung on a chain against her heart. She listened, occasionally asking one of her quiet, surgical questions that cut through pages of rhetoric to the bone of the thing. They were a team. He watched the horizon. She tended the cracks in the pavement. His wolf maintained a steady, contented awareness of her at all times, her position, her scent, the subtle shifts that meant she was about to make a point. The mate is preparing to speak. Her observation will likely be more strategically sound than ours. This is acceptable. We chose well. After the meeting, they walked through the gardens. A group of children were playing, reenacting the Mirror Week. The bards had turned it into a song within a month, and now every child in the citadel knew the words. A little boy stood on a tree stump, puffed with self-importance. "Ask of me anything," he boomed. A little girl put her hands on her hips. "The throne." The boy king deflated. "Oh, right, that." Reed laughed, a real, deep belly laugh that echoed off the garden walls. He pulled Wren close, nuzzled into her neck, breathing in rosemary and bread and the steady, unshakable scent of home. "You've ruined dramatic declarations for an entire generation of alphas," he murmured against her skin. She leaned into him. Her wolf, the sharp, sarcastic, endlessly self-assured part of her that had found an ancient law in a dusty library and whispered, "This is ours," was quiet for once. Content. "Good," Wren said. "Maybe they'll learn to make better offers." His wolf, settled and steady and whole, observed. The mate is smiling. Her heart rate is optimal. The pack is secure. The garden is tended. A long pause. "This is a good day. Note it." Reed noted it.